Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the only true revolution that has ever taken place in man's history. Evolved the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny.
The United States of America, the greatest nation in history, ordained by our founders to be guided by divine providence. But today, we are witnessing the orchestrated disintegration of America. Take a few seconds and take a look around your town, your state, look at your country and your world, and boldly ask, what in the hell is going on?
But freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Welcome to the podcast Project Third Eye Opened, where we dare to question with boldness the events that are unfolding around us that others won't. At the end of the day, it is we the people who will decide the destiny of the nation. Now, introducing your host, Tony L.
Greetings, America. How the hell is everyone doing these very, very challenging, exciting, scary times, but very exciting times in which we now are currently living and existing. This is your host, Tony L., and you are about to experience another Project That I Open podcast, where again we seek not to change what you know to be true, but simply ask each and every one of you to boldly question what the hell is going on around you. Again, I also like to must give praise to the Most High, for without Him, I would not be here, would not have been born in the greatest country on the planet, and I would not be sharing this information with you. These are very challenging times, economically, spiritually, more importantly, socially, but definitely spiritually and economically. To that end, if you haven't looked around and seen the economic firestorm that is coming your way and that many of you may be already in, definitely look at diversifying into precious metals, gold, silver, platinum. The poor man's gold is definitely silver. For those of you who may be, not in a position to buy gold, but definitely look at silver. Just for being a listener, you could go to my website, project.iopen.com. Project, third spelled out, the letter I, opened, ed.com, and check out that offer, where you could purchase gold, purchase silver, pretty much any precious metal at a discounted rate. And if you want to, you can offer the same opportunity to people that you know and love as well. Check it out. If you don't get it there, definitely get your hand on some real money, some constitutional money that will never go to zero. Real money, not currency, real money. Check that out. Take advantage of it. Again, the days of the dollar as we know it is on life support. And I'm going to go into a little bit of that today. Trump is, I don't think he's reached his 100 days, but he has came in on fire. He obviously has learned his lesson from last go around, where he surrounded himself around with a lot of people that he should not have. people who were part of the what's called deep state. Not that he necessarily has avoided all of that this time around, but he's doing a lot better from all appearances. Um, and he has done his homework. Maybe last time he really didn't want to be president, they expected that he would win, and he really didn't take it that seriously. That's not the case this time around. He has came in with an agenda, the fact that he doesn't have to worry about necessarily getting reelected. On top of that, he came in with arguably a mandate. People wanted him this time, wanted his policies, didn't want the policies of the progressive left, hate America, and want to make marriage, irrelevant, and womanhood irrelevant, everything that comes along with that, and the traditional American founding and traditions irrelevant. They didn't want any of that. And he has set his sights particularly on when he say make America great again, he means that. Particularly when you look at his trade policies. Not to say I definitely don't agree with how he is going about the issue of tariffs and trade. I think it would have been better if he had been more humble, but that's just not Trump. He definitely is the bull in the china shop, and that's good. And that could be bad. We still are in the wait and see process to see how this is going to turn out. So far, it's been very rocky. But as I say, to know history is to be able to look at current events with from a different perspective, and nothing's new under the sun. And his economic position has always been bullish on tariffs. Has always been where he saw the world taking advantage of the United States and America. So the fact that he's putting forth his vision should not be of any surprise to anyone who has really been serious about studying this man and watching this man. He's not an ignorant man. He reads a lot, from what I understand, and he did not get to where he's at by being an ignorant, lack of knowledge man. So anyone who thinks that he is that is selling Trump short, particularly if that same person accepted a seriously cognitive challenge individual for 4 years. And was looking at giving him another 4 years, and didn't have a problem with that. That person should shut the hell up. They have no credibility in this discussion at all, in my humble opinion. But this position in regards to trade is not new. Our founders had similar positions, Hamilton, and particularly Madison, which I'm going to focus on him, James Madison. And Trump is channeling a lot of Madisonian energy when you look at his policies in regards to tariffs, trade, and the issue of America's economic sovereignty and economic independence, energy independence. And we should understand and look more into how these two gentlemen, centuries apart, I would not necessarily say that mirror each other, but how how much does Trump policies mirror that of James Madison? So let's look first at who's James Madison in regards to his policies. Oh, something. All right. So James Madison believed in national sovereignty and self-sufficiency. He believed it is very important for countries, strong countries, particularly ours, to be able to basically clothe, feed, and defend itself. He believed in economic independence. It was essential to political independence. He argued that the United States should protect and nurture its domestic energies through tariffs and trade restrictions. Sound familiar? Especially against foreign powers that use unfair practices against American goods. Number one, economic self-sufficiency. Madison believed that America should be economically self-sufficient. He feared that too much dependence on foreign goods, especially from Europe, could make the U.S. politically weak and manipulable. Industries critical to survival, i.e., agriculture, manufacturing, shipping, needed to be built and protected within the United States. He believed in protective tariffs, saying that tariffs such as taxes on imports is a way to protect young American industries from stronger, more established European competitors, at that time, Britain. He argued that without temporary protection, U.S. industries would never be able to grow and compete fairly. Now, he didn't say it couldn't compete. He said his view is basically it's just like a newborn baby. You want to possibly give it time to exist in an incubator, free from predators or harmful bacteria or things that may cause it harm, so that it can eventually have his immune system strong enough to be able to go out into the environment and survive, if not flourish. He believed in trade retaliation. He believed that the United States should retaliate against unfair trade practices, i.e., Britain, France, or any country discriminated against American goods. The U.S. should impose tariffs or restrictions to defend its economic interests. That just makes sense. You don't think other countries aren't doing that? The question I have in all of this is, why is this what Trump is doing? Why is this so new to so many people and so threatening to so many people and so disturbing to so many people? Why have this not just been the MO from current administrations? Biden, Obama, Clinton. Why is this notion of protecting America's interests so repugnant to so many people, and like they don't understand? I don't get it. This should be what all leaders of this country should be doing. This should not be anything new. This should not be anything that would take people off guard. But the fact that this has not been the case, and Trump is putting forth this energy to make it reality. It's frightful to a lot of people, but this should not be frightful. Again, Trump could be doing a hell of a lot better job as far as explaining his positions, explaining his why to the American people. And I don't know why his handlers aren't suggesting him to do just that. I mean, Reagan was the last president that I could recall that sat down in front of the camera, speaking to the American people and trying to express the dire situation that the U.S. economy or the U.S. government was in regards to the deficit. And of course, history is what it is after that, but at least he attempted it. Again, he could have done a much better job at doing it and holding to his position instead of letting the Democrats finagle him into simply tax cut without being serious about cutting spending. But that's a history that keeps repeating also. When even Trump in his last term cut taxes, but he didn't cut spending seriously. And that will need to be done. Hopefully he does it this time, but if he doesn't, again, history will repeat itself and the job will only be half done. Moving on. He supported using economic pressure instead of war to gain respect internationally. And that's what you hear from Trump, being respected internationally when it comes to trade, not just bending over and taking it between the cheeks, and not acting like this is the 1970s, where or the 1940s or 1950s, when a large amount, if not the majority of the world trade ran through the United States. That's far from reality today, and we need to act accordingly. Madison believed limited global dependence. He believed that he warned America about free trades, or he wanted America to trade freely where possible. So these free trade zones, NAFTA, all of these things, so definitely would not be okay with Madison. So even though he believed that America should trade freely where possible, but not at the expense of our national interests or security, he promoted bilateral trade, one-on-one deals. Just like in your own relationship, you're not trying to necessarily do a broad stroke proposition to the whole neighborhood. You want to pick your friends individually, because you may not like everybody. Everybody may not have your best interests at heart. You may not want to be in a relationship with someone in your neighborhood. The same thing applies in the neighborhood of the world. Madison understood this, and Trump does too. And if you remember George Washington's warning not to get entangled with European issues, right? Not to get entangled with Europe, because Europe has been warring against each other for eons, even at that time. We haven't listened. Madison believed in national unity through trade. Madison thought a strong domestic economy would unify the young United States. Developing internal industries, factories, farms, shipyards would tie different regions together, create mutual economic interests, strengthening the union politically. Family that plays together stays together. Family that works together gets stronger together. The shipyards on the East Coast and West Coast are booming. That spreads economic vitality, not through that immediate economy, putting jobs, people to work, creating new businesses that support that plant, that shipyard. But also, if there is businesses outside that immediate area, maybe the the middle of the country, the north, the south, that could also benefit from those industries, the shipyard, those ports, those manufacturing facilities. That's all done domestically. We're all stronger. We're all stronger. Developing internal industries, factories, farms, shipyards will tie different regions together, as I just mentioned, and create mutual economic interests. So, the so-called trade imbalance. I ran across this article by the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. They have an index, and basically it's you can find this online. And basically it looks at the backdrop. It says it makes suggestions on what Trump should do in regards to tariffs and trade. Says against that backdrop, the administration should focus on countries where systematically where countries are systematically unfair. The mercantilist trade policies are inflicting the most significant damage on the United States economy and U.S. corporations, large and small alike, and where the United States stands to gain the most by restoring balanced trade. Accordingly, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation has developed the Trade Imbalance Index described in this report. It evaluates 48 countries, 15 of which are included in the European Union bloc, and on 11 measures to ascertain which are the biggest trade mercantilists or scofflaws, and where the Trump administration should concentrate its attention as it seeks to advance a trade policy that's more effectively defends U.S. interests and ensures more balanced trade relations. Okay, so let's look at this. First, trade balance in goods and information services. This category considers U.S. trade balances in goods and information services. The ITIF used raw values of the trade balances rather than the relative values, i.e. trade balance as a share of GDP, to better measure the overall harm a nation has on the United States which it runs a surplus. In other words, a nation with which the United States has a high deficit would cause more harm to the United States even if the deficit was small when compared to its GDP. 2. Trade restrictions. These involve a simple means test rate across all product categories, the prevalence of non-tariff trade barriers, NTBS, and the nation's service trade restrictions index score. Number 3, taxes and regulations. These cover the extent of country's Digital Markets Act, DMA, regulations, extent of digital services tax, DSTs, extent on pharmaceutical price controls, the presence of antitrust fines, and the presence of non-competition fines on the digital economy. So this have direct impact on how our IT firms are doing in those countries. What kind of assets do they have? Is it fair? Intellectual property, IP. This category includes the 2020 USTR Section 301 watch list and the nation's score on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce International IP Index. The USTR is a U.S. Trade Representative Section 301 watch list. Okay. This is important in determining whether the Trump administration should prioritize that nation for a trade response. The trade balance indicator accounts for only 1/4 of the total weighted score in our index. Ultimately, the article goes to say, more important than bilateral trade balances are the underlying factors affecting U.S. trade with a given country. I think Trump tried to go over that when he did that ceremony at the White House, outside the White House. I say tried, because there's other things other than just how much does a country charge for United States goods to be brought into their country. There's other things that they also can apply as far as fees that could cause the cost of those products to go up in their country. What's going to say? Weighing these considerations, China, India, the EU, Vietnam, and Argentina ranks at the 5 worst offenders in this index. Keep that in mind. China's all definitely going to be at the top of the list, but how many of y'all thought India would be there? And isn't it interesting that Vice President Vance supposedly struck a deal with India already? So let's look at this graph. This is a figure from this article, and it's an overall score of the worst and best for performing nations according to this index. China is, of course, number 1. Negative 15.12 score. India, number 2, 12.02. The EU, negative 9.14. Vietnam, negative 5.3, and goes down from there. But look at how it's broken down. You have trade balance, you have mean tariff rate. Okay, you mentioned that. We have the non-tariff barriers. Again, these are like the Europe has the added value tax. You know, those are non-tariff barriers. Services restrictions. Countries put requirements on imported goods to protect their domestic industry. which makes sense, but let's make it fair. Um, what else? The DMA equivalents, digital service tax. You see how all these countries, those of you who are looking on the video cast, you can see how really it's not it's not even fair, particularly when you look at China, and then when you look at Europe. Of course, Europe is not just one country, but when you look at how they are protecting their what's the largest one here, their digital services, it's crazy. It's crazy. So again, it's not just one thing in regards to tariffs. There's other underlying issues that are causing issues when the United States and its companies try to do business with other countries. You know, that has to be looked at. And it is being looked at by Trump. Before we get to that, let's look at a couple of countries like China. Again, this article goes on, talks about China. Big write up about China, as you should expect. China's ranking first in this study is no surprise. This country has persistently failed to adhere to the commitments it made to the United States and other international trade partners when it joined the World Trade Organizations. Remember that? I think it was under, I want to say it's under Bush and Clinton. I think pushed China, well, pushed the door open for China to not only get favored trade status with the United States, but also to get them into the World Trade Organization, because they thought by doing that, showing kindness would somehow equate to the leopard changing its spots and freeing its people. I mean, it's very unrealistic view, and I don't know if they did that deliberately or we were just deceived. Because I can't see them being that ignorant, but been wrong before. Over the past decade, the country has received a nearly 3.5 trillion dollar trade surplus in manufactured goods with the United States. In 2023, China's gross goods trade surplus with the United States reached $279 billion, with this amount growing to 295 billion. So from 279 to 295 billion from in just 1 year, 2023, 2024. And the figure represented about 1/3 of China's nearly $1 trillion surplus with the world last year, as its exports swamped the globe. China's 2022 simple mean tariff rate stood at 6.5. The USTR, U.S. Trade Rep, identified China as a priority watch list country in 2024 for its continued infringements on U.S. IP, intellectual property rights. The report notes that long-standing issues remain, including technology transfer, trade secrets, counterfeiting, online piracy, copyright law, and patent and related policies. The Commission on Theft of American Intellectual Property has estimated that China's IP theft may cost the United States economy as much as $600 billion annually. A 2019 CNBC Global CFO Council of Foreign Relations, sorry, Freudian slip there. Global CFO Council report found that 1 in 5 North American corporations had their IP stolen in China in 2018. That's just 1 year. In the ITIF series of How Innovative is China in High-Tech Industries reports, ITIF documented numerous cases of IP theft in sectors ranging from electric vehicles and nuclear technology to semiconductors and electronic displays. China also continues to be the world's leading source of counterfeit and pirated goods. Oh, there's more. Forced transfer of technology or intellectual property as a condition of gaining access to the Chinese market. Let me say that again. Forced transfer, meaning that a lot of people don't understand. Manufacturing companies have to give up their intellectual properties just to gain access to the Chinese market, which I never understood that. This is way back in Reagan time when I first heard this. I'm like, is it that important? Are we doing it the same to get into the market of India or Europe? How does that make sense? So when you look at how China has become a serious threat to the United States, question has to come out. How did this country get that way? Through our technology, for large part. So can we blame China for doing what they do? For doing what we allow them to do? Countries make choices. I mean, businesses make choices. They don't have to go into the Chinese market like that. I always thought that America had the advantage over China because they wanted access to our markets. Because we got money. That's still the case. That will always be the case. I've never understood why American corporations had to strip down and show their goods. Not only show their goods, but reveal the ingredients for the secret sauce. To only later have that come back in the form of a competitor beating them with that sauce recipe. That's never made sense to me. But this is where we are. This is where we are. For instance, it goes on to say, April 12, 2024 article in the Wall Street Journal reported that China's push to replace foreign technology is now focused on cutting American chip makers out of the country's telecommunications system altogether. The move would impact a variety of U.S. semiconductor companies, including AMD and Intel. The article notes that Chinese officials earlier this year directed the nation's largest telecom carriers to phase out foreign processors that are core to their networks by 2027. The effort is similar to one articulated in Document 79, which requires state-owned enterprises in finance, energy, and other sectors to replace foreign software in their information technology systems by 2027. Is that good? So should we wait for that to happen Or should we do something now? Trump is saying we should do something now. Because they seem to be very serious about protecting their domestic companies. Why is it bad for the United States to do the same, or any other country to do the same? Let's look at India. India ranks second in this index. In 2024, India recorded $45.7 billion trade surplus with the United States. That was on top of the $43.3 billion trade surplus the year before. India's simple mean tariff rate is 14.3%, while a trade rated basis, India's rate is almost 12% compared to America's rate at 2.2. What does that mean? The trade weighted index, example, for exporters, a depreciating index means that their goods become cheaper and more competitive abroad, potentially increasing sales. So in contrast, it's not a good thing. That's why this is so important. Okay. In 2016, India implemented a equalization levy of 6% on non-residents engaged in online advertisement and related activities with Indian customers. A tax. India's Finance Act of 2020 expanded the EL to introduce a levy on e-commerce supply or services equal to 2% of gross income facilitated by the non-resident e-commerce operator. 2% of the gross, not the net, the gross. On March 12, 2024, the Indian Ministry of Corporate Affairs released a draft report of the Committee on Digital Competition Law, along with a draft bill on the Digital Competition Act that bears a striking resemblance to the EU's problematic Digital Markets Act. The legislative embraces an ex-ante-regulatory model and follows the path of overbearing competitive policy that was taken by the EU. And we're going to that in a few minutes. India remains one of the world's most challenging major economies with respect to protection and enforcement of IP. Who knew that? India continues to place elevated restrictions on patent subject matters eligibility that exceeds the required novelty, inventive step, and industrial applicability requirements. Under Section 3D of the Indian Patent Act, there exists an additional fourth hurdle regarding the inventive step and enhanced efficiency that limits patentability for certain types of pharmaceutical inventions and chemical compounds. India ranks 42nd out of 52 countries on the Global Innovative Policy Center's International IP Index. Elsewhere, India is pirating of film and audio-visual content through illicit video recordings remains a major challenge. That's India, supposed to be one of our on the United States allies. So then we look at Europe, the EU. The EU ranks third in this index and is among the leading practitioners of discriminatory trade policies, the article says, targeting U.S. enterprises, particularly those in digital industries. Thanks especially to the DMA, the Digital Services Act. In fact, there are over 100 digital regulations in force across EU, enforced by at least 270 agencies. They're serious. They're serious about protecting their grounds. Why shouldn't the United States? Article goes on to say, but if the ITIF has written, but as ITIF has written, the legislation should really be called the U.S. Tech Firms Act, as the legislation intentionally singles out U.S. companies. For instance, the European Parliament reporter for the DMA, Andres Schwab, suggests that the DMA should unquestionably target only the 5 biggest U.S. digital firms, i.e. Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. Basically, DMA and the DSA have been designed to cover almost exclusively U.S. firms and not the European or Chinese competitors that offer similar services. In 2023, the article ran a trade surplus. In 2023, the EU ran a trade surplus of $208.7 billion with the United States. The EU runs significant trade surpluses with the United States across a number of advanced technology industries, including pharmaceutical, medical devices, motor vehicle and parts, electrical goods, telecommunication goods, chemicals, and instruments. Europe's large trade surplus to the United States in pharmaceuticals stems largely from the extensive drug price controls implemented by most countries on the continent and their failure to pay adequate prices on innovative medicines. So that's one of the underlying restrictions that cost Americans companies access to Europe. That's in addition to tariffs. So how does this all look when you break down the industries and how the trade between EU and the United States looks? Looks like this. You have, you look at EU imports, EU exports, and a balance. For those of you who are able to look at this, it ain't pretty. It ain't pretty. The EU export grossly is larger than EU imports. It's not even close, particularly when you look at medical and pharmaceutical products. Not even close. And when you look at motor car and motor vehicles, definitely not close. This is what Trump is looking at. Make it fair. If it's going to be free trade, make it fair trade. As he mentioned, reciprocal tariffs, Meaning that if you charge me X amount of dollars or our industries to gain access to your country, we'll do the same. I don't see a problem with that. But it's also this underlining um, cost 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 issues as well, like the added value tax. All of those make U.S. products going into the Eurozone cost more. And again, if they want to protect their industries, fine. But don't get mad when the United States want to do the same. To me, that just makes sense. That just makes sense to me. Here's an example. While the European Union applies a relatively low simple mean tariff, this obscures a variety of value-added taxes, the article goes on to say, and other fees that make U.S. products more expensive. For example, the EU levels a 10% tariff on U.S. car imports, while the United States imposes a measly 2.5%. And President Trump has observed when Europe's value-added taxes, the VAT, are added in, U.S. car exports to Europe can be a tariff and tax as high as 30%. So again, it's not just one element here in regards, it's not just tariffs. Not just tariffs. And again, unfortunately, Trump doesn't do a good enough job in breaking this down and explaining it to the American people, nor has he tried just to go on a night talk with the American people from the Oval Office or somewhere. Just to tell people what's what. Be very beneficial to them, I think. So, what does this mean? When you look at the weighted standardized scores, you really understand how big of an issue this is. In regards to China, it's like negative 277.5 billion. That the imbalance. The EU is 207.9 billion. Mexico, 1.51 billion. Vietnam, 151 in regards to Mexico. I don't know if I said that correctly or not. And then Vietnam, 104.5 billion in deficit. Canada, 68.7. Japan, 67.9. And, just looking at the top three, China, EU, and Mexico. Problems. But let's look at history. When you look at the issue of trade, we have to look at what's taken place in the past, particularly NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed in 1994 between America, United States, Canada, and Mexico. Probably a free trade zone. What does free trade mean? And what's been the benefit, particularly in regards to NAFTA? Positives: cheaper consumer goods, boosted exports, efficiency gains, means that it forced U.S. companies to be more competitive. Growth in some industries, not all. The industries that really benefited had to do with agriculture, aerospace, and the financial services. It boosted exports, particularly to Mexico and Canada. And of course, it made goods cheaper. And we have become addicted to cheap foreign goods. But What were the negatives? We lost manufacturing jobs big time, particularly when you look at what occurred in the Rust Belt. And you really can't fault company owners, industry owners. You give them a way out of paying higher wages. And when you look at wages and employment costs being the highest cost with the business, you give them a way out to produce the same goods with cheaper labor. I'd be a fool not to take advantage of that. So they were giving an out. In doing so, manufacturing jobs left at a rate, according to many estimates, at least 700,000 jobs were lost over several decades. When you have a U.S. employee who may be making, $20 an hour, having to compete against someone who equivalently is earning $2 an hour, or is willing to come to the United States and work for half, who do you think is going to win? So we have wages being suppressed, particularly on the lower end, particularly with, when we go and look at those who are not as educated, the young, those on the lower end of the economic ladder. And then, of course, you're going to have the trade deficits. All of those were products of so-called free trade zone of NAFTA and others like it. To give you even better, more vivid view of this, we look at this information that was supplied by the EPI, Economic Policy Institution, I want to say, analysis and the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Census Bureau data. Changes in NAFTA, U.S. trade with Canada, 93, domestic exports were 101 billion. In 02, 142 billion. So that's good with Canada. Exports. Imports dropped. Negative 129 in 93. In 02, negative 208. So that's a change of 61.1%. Net exports dropped 93, negative 29 billion, 02, negative 67 billion. That's a change to a net negative $38 billion. Mexico, domestic exports, 44 billion in 93. That's positive. 85 billion in 02. That's a gain of 42 billion. That's good, exports. But imports dropped. Mexico, negative 45 billion in 93. 02, we have 134 billion. 134 billion. $134 billion. brings a total of negative 88 billion. So the totals in NAFTA domestic exports in 93, 100 and plus 144 billion, and 02 plus 227 billion. So that's a positive of $83 billion. But in imports, negative 175 billion in 93, 02 negative 342, and that's a change of 168 billion. Net exports, negative 30 billion. 93, 02, negative 115. So you see, negatives. So when you compare Trump and Madison's, they mirror in regards to trade and tariff wars. Trump's, for example, imposing tariffs on a range of imports, particularly from China. Trump used tariffs as a tool to protect American industries and reduce reliance on foreign goods. The trade war with China is the most notable example, if y'all remember that, where Trump implemented tariffs up to $370 billion worth of Chinese goods. Madison was big on protecting domestic industries. Number two, we're showing manufacturing jobs. Trump has made it clear he wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. He wants to do that. He wants to incentivize companies to not only stay in the United States, but also relocate to the United States. And you saw that in his tax policies, in his initial administration, and you will see that again coming up in this administration. Madison thought the same thing. It's vital to keep U.S. companies here vibrant and protected. Withdrawing from multilateral trade agreements like the Paris Climate Accords, which was totally anti-American, and of course, revamping NAFTA to USMCA. Okay, get out of it. It's advantageous to U.S. interests. America First policies. That includes rolling back of environmental regulations, support of fossil fuel, making the United States, for the first time in a long time, energy independent, and recognizing that we have a surplus of energy resources under our feet, more than any other country on the planet, particularly when it comes to coal and natural gas, which we should be using more, and figuring out how to use coal, because China's using coal, but yet you want us to enter into a climate treaty with China? How does that make sense? Because they're not going to stop using coal because they understand the value of them using coal. It grows their country. It makes them energy independent because they don't have natural domestic energy sources. When you look at how big it is, that's an issue. And how many people they have, that's an issue. National security and foreign investment restrictions. Don't let everybody into your home to take advantage of your industries, particularly when it comes to IT. That's big time. And we need to definitely look at China's influence on major U.S. universities. That is a serious issue. Immigration and labor policies, and we see how Trump is trying to restrict foreigners from coming in and taking American jobs, but there is another side to this. Everything's in context. You can't stupefy the American people through an education system that doesn't work and focuses on indoctrination, not education, and removes the pathway for people who are not designed to go to college, to look at trades and skills such as welding, such as building, such as vocational studies, and then expect for all people coming out of those educational systems, so-called education systems, to be able to provide the skills and labor that is needed domestically, compared to someone, say, from Mexico or some other country who has not forgot how to hammer a nail, has not forgot how to do things with their hands. That's just not realistic. Or who has a work ethic. There's a lot of things that we must do domestically in our own home if we are going to realistically compete against the laborers from other countries. And if a company domestically can't find domestic people to employ to do what they need to grow their business, they must be able to look elsewhere. And they will, for their very survival. So that has to be part of the equation. Again, America First policy, regards to trade. America first. I mean, there's nothing more need to be said about that. But what does this all mean? It's not just this in a vacuum. He's looking at the future. And I mentioned this before in regards to the de-dollarization that's going on. I mentioned in a production a while ago, I may need to revisit, I probably need to revisit. We cannot imagine the dollar only being able to be used within the United States. We can't imagine that. But that was actually the case prior to the Brentwood Accords. If y'all don't know what that is, y'all need to definitely do a Google search. After World War II, no other country was able to economically stand on its own like America. So the countries came in, sat down, and said, hey, you take the ball, America. We can make your currency superior to all others. But in return, you promise to keep your dollar pegged to gold. So one go off the rails. America said yes. Of course, Nixon reneged on that, taking us off the gold standard, turning all the world currencies into a fiat currency, not backed by anything other than the citizens' belief that's worth something. But the de-dollarization is occurring, not being talked about, unfortunately. But this is what Trump is looking at as well. Eventually, the dollar is not going to be the king because, again, history repeats itself. The reason why Nixon had to renege on the agreement was that the United States overextended itself economically and militarily and domestically. And the value of the dollar was going down. The world's leaders saw this happening. In regards to trade, they say, hey, we don't want this depreciating paper. We want gold. So they made them run on the U.S. banks, the Federal Reserve. I want gold. I don't want this paper. Because y'all financial house is upside down. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. The same thing's happening now. The same thing's happening now. So they are looking to create another reserve currency or a bucket of reserve currencies where they don't have to be tied to owning the US dollar. Even if they have to make agreements with countries using their own currency, totally sidestepping the use of the US dollar. What does this mean? When you look at, according to most of the recent data available for the IMF fund, the US dollar accounts for 57% of allocated currency reserves as of the third quarter in 2024. 57%. Well ahead of the euro, 20%, Japanese yen, 60%. So it's not going to, the situation is not going to change tomorrow, but it is changing because the United States has shown that it's not serious about its economic house. Again, they're overextending themselves militarily and they're growing their expense domestically with social welfare programs. We're not Europe. We can't spend more money on social welfare programs than we do on defense, which is why you see Trump wanting to encourage Europe to put more dollars in their own defense. So therefore, we could reduce, well, the United States can reduce its expenditures on defense, particularly in regards to protecting Europe. He's not putting this stuff out his ass, people. He's doing it for a reason. But when you look at, goes on to say that although there's no doubt that it remains on top, the dollar's share of allocated currency reserves has fallen over the past few decades, down from more than 70% in just 2001. Not that long ago, folks, not that long ago. From 70% to 57%. Again, the decreases led some experts to question whether we may be experiencing a de-dollarization, a reduction of the world's reliance on the US dollar as a primary reserve currency. Yes. And China is leading it, but China has an issue. Nobody trusts China. That's a big issue because they don't tell the truth and they hide so much of what's actually going on in their economy. Businesses do not like uncertainty. They definitely don't like being lied to when it comes to their money and where they're going to put it. So though people, for whatever reason, want to champion China's rise and think that they're going to flip the United States, they might do it economically, but that's military, but it's only because the United States is giving so much of its technology willingly, unwillingly to China, to therefore use against us. Which hopefully Trump would change that, but he can't do it on his own because he's only here for maybe 3 good years. It need to be a national policy that is forever ending, forever never ending, forever pursued by every leader after Trump. But we all know Democrats love communists, so we'll see. Imagine a world not dominated by the US dollar. Potential negative impacts: high interest rates, If foreign governments and investors want to hold the U.S. dollars, the Treasury and Treasury bonds, the U.S. will have to offer higher interest rates to attract buyers. That's not good news for them, but that's not good news for us. It's good news for them. But for us, it will make mortgages, car loans, and borrowing costs go up. A weaker dollar, demand for the dollar could fall, weakening its value. If you think imports are high now, wait till it costs even more to buy that same product, which is why, again, Trump is trying to get more products built here. Makes sense. Inflation pressure, a weaker dollar and higher import costs will fuel inflation, especially on goods that are being imported. The loss of exorbitant privileges. Again, we cannot imagine not being able to call the shots internationally in regards to financial issues. We cannot imagine not being able to go abroad and use a dollar. We can't imagine that. We can't imagine the benefit and the privileges that we will lose when the US dollar is no longer the bull of the woods economically. Because we have not seen a time that it wasn't. This is what Trump is seeing. This is coming because the world doesn't trust the United States government to handle its financial house and act with maturity, humility, and moral, with a clear moral compass. They just went through 4 years where the head of SSS was a guy dressed as a girl, and the United States trying to impose trade policies on African countries or countries who understood that man is a man and a woman is a woman, and wanted them to say no, a woman could be a man. The scene is to say, do we want to be in bed with these people and trust them for our economic survival and well-being? And then you want to up a $4 trillion plus trade deficit willingly and then acting like it's no big deal? Yeah. Countries are seeing that. We cannot imagine the world not being dominated by US dollar. And that's coming. Some positives, okay? Again, if we are producing more home, then we don't have to worry about imports so much. So therefore, with the weaker dollar, it'll make our goods cheaper abroad. But we gotta be making stuff here to make that, right? Manufacturing rebalancing. Higher costs of imports could encourage more domestic production, which is what Trump is trying to encourage. Make more stuff here, be less reliant on imports. We have more control of our future. But the de-dollarization, it ain't gonna be pretty. It's not gonna be pretty because then who's running the world if not the United States? China? We had to look at this. I wish Trump was more eloquent in making these very needed presentations to us, the American people, because this is all this common sense. But if we don't know what's happening and why it's happening, then we can't make educated decisions and choices in what direction we want to live and pursue in our own personal lives at home, and who we're going to vote in to pursue as a country. If you don't know your history, it's going to repeat. And when it repeats, and you don't know that this is not the first time, then you will act like this is the first time. You know. But the United States has to get its house in order. Has to pay off debts outstanding. Be morally responsible for its actions. And put God back on the throne. Without those things happening, we are in a world of hurt. So when you look at, again, the dollar's use and share amongst the reserves since Brentwood, it has gone down. From the high of 78% in 1970 to a low right now of 57%, and is going down. And it went down particularly since Trump, with his unveiling of his trade policies. Hopefully it will return some, but trust is not an easy thing to regain once it's lost, once people lose faith in you and how you handle things. 50%, I can see that. Unless things change quickly. Unless things change quickly. We are in a world of hurt. And we must understand that this is what's happening. And be able to act accordingly. Respond accordingly. Trump may not be the rapping that you will want a leader, but compared to what the United States and the American people had to deal with over the last 4 years, this man is serious about doing right by the American people. But the education level of the American people is a problem, coupled with the inability for Trump to articulate his position to the American people, maybe because he knows the education level of the American people will be problematic to him getting his message out and for us to understand what he's saying, combined with the control of the entertainment industry and news media by the left that will look to distort what he's saying. But this is where we are. This is where we are.
Thanks for listening to today's show. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. And look for Project Third Eye Open on your favorite social media platforms. Check out our webpage at projectthirdeyeopen.com. And that's third eye with the letter I. projectthirdeyeopen.com. Or drop us a note at tonyel@projectthirdeyeopen.com. That's tonyel@projectthirdeyeopen.com. As you wait for our next podcast to drop, don't take anything we've said as fact. Instead, do your own homework, make up your own mind, then take action. Until next time, be blessed, be good, and be free.